You didn't need an alarm. That's the first thing worth remembering. At some point in childhood, you became the kind of person who woke up early on the one day you were allowed to sleep in. The house was quiet. Your parents were asleep. The living room was yours. If it was fall or winter, the room hadn't warmed up yet. You pulled a blanket off the back of the couch and settled in front of the television set, and you waited. In those days, the television didn't just turn on. It came to life slowly, the image brightening from the center outward, the sound arriving a moment after the picture, like it had a special entrance to make. You poured cereal without waking anyone. Your parents might have even warned you not to wake them. You may have eaten a couple of pieces straight from the box. No one was awake to stop you. The network started their Saturday morning blocks somewhere between 6:30 and 7. ABC, NBC, CBS, all three ran children's cartoons back to back from early morning until noon. What followed was 4 or 5 hours of shows designed entirely for you. The lineup had a rhythm you knew by heart. Maybe you started with the early, quieter shows, the ones that felt like they were still warming up alongside you. And then the hour arrived when the real programming kicked in, and you moved closer to the set. Bugs Bunny, Roadrunner, Scooby-Doo, the Jetsons, Johnny Quest, Super Friends. Hanna-Barbera was everywhere. Their particular style, their limited animation, and the same voice actors cycling through a dozen different characters. You knew the characters even if you didn't know the company behind it. There were shows you watched because you loved them, and shows you watched because you were waiting for a favorite show. Both kinds mattered. You let the schedule carry you along with it. The commercials were their own family reunion. Cereal brands ran campaigns aimed squarely at a child sitting alone in a quiet living room with no parent nearby to say no. Sugar Smacks, Cocoa Puffs, Captain Crunch, Trix. The characters in those ads were as recognizable as cartoon characters surrounding them. Toy commercials arrived months before Christmas and arrived in your house before the Sears catalog made it through your front door. You watched an ad for a slot car set or a chemistry kit and remembered the image of it for weeks. Saturday morning cartoons were different from afternoon reruns because they had a beginning, middle, and an end. Anticipation started when the house was still dark. Then they arrived, and the show stopped around noon, and the network shifted to golf, news, and programming that clearly wasn't meant for you. The end gave the morning a boundary. You knew it was time to go outside. And because every child in your neighborhood was watching the same 3 channels, it created a shared experience that carried into the school week. You talked about what you'd seen. You'd argue which show was better. Saturday morning cartoons were, in a practical sense, the first thing many American children had that was entirely their own in a world geared towards adults. The world that lasted from the late 1950s through the mid-1980s in its fullest form. Children kept their interest, but the economics that built it gradually stopped working. The block existed because Saturday morning was inexpensive airtime that could be turned into reliable profit. Children were a loyal audience, and the companies that made cereal and toys were willing to pay to reach them. Animation was cheap to produce and could be rerun for years. For a long time, these cartoons made lots of money. By the 1970s, regulators and advocacy groups were paying close attention to children's television, how much advertising it carried, and whether it served any purpose beyond selling things. In 1974, the FCC pressured the networks to reduce advertising time in children's programming and include some educational content. The networks complied, adding short segments like Schoolhouse Rock between their regular cartoons. The block stayed largely intact, but the scrutiny became a house guest that wasn't leaving. what finally unraveled the model was cable television and federal laws arriving almost simultaneously. Through the 1980s, Nickelodeon, the Disney Channel, and eventually Cartoon Network began offering children's programming every day of the week at any hour. The scarcity that had made Saturday morning feel like an event, the reason you woke up early, the reason it had weight, began to dissolve. Then, the Children's Television Act of 1990 required broadcast networks to factor educational programming into their license renewals. And by 1997, the FCC had tightened that into a firm requirement of 3 hours per week. Networks now had a regulatory obligation that cartoons couldn't satisfy. Educational and informational shows moved into the Saturday morning block, and the cartoons were gradually pushed out. By the mid-1990s, the traditional block was largely gone from the major networks. The last handout was the CW, which carried a Saturday morning cartoon block until 2008 under the Kids WB banner, by then a remnant of something that had already ended. Another pivotal change to your childhood routine quietly turned the doorknob and left without saying goodbye. At some point in the 1990s, a child woke up on a Saturday morning and found that the programming that was supposed to be there had been replaced. A live-action show about children solving problems. A nature segment with a lesson attached. Something that felt unmistakably in different clothing. You didn't know what happened, but you knew it wasn't what you woke up to watch. The cartoons didn't disappear from children's lives. They moved to cable, then to VHS, eventually to on-demand streaming, where they became available at any hour on any day. In terms of sheer volume, children today can access more animation than any generation before them. But availability isn't the same thing as ritual. What Saturday morning gave you wasn't just cartoons. It was a few hours with a frame around them. It started when the house was dark and quiet, and it ran until the morning was spent, and then it ended. The programming shifted, the golf tournament came on, and that was the signal. It was time to go outside. The rule didn't need to be enforced. The change in what was on the screen that meant the morning was over and the rest of Saturday was waiting for you. That boundary was a part of what made it feel like something worth having. You knew when it was yours. You knew when it was over. If any part of this brought back a show, a serial, the particular quiet of a Saturday morning before the rest of the house woke up, leave a comment. We'd like to hear what you remember. Every household had its own version of this, and the details are worth keeping. If this video was worth your time, a like helps other people find it. If you want to keep revisiting the parts of American life that changed quietly while most of us were busy eating our cereal, subscribing will bring the next one to you when it's ready. Saturday morning cartoons lasted about 40 years. They were built on economics, sustained by habit, and ended when the laws changed. What replaced them wasn't worse, but you didn't wake up excited for it. You realize Saturday morning left you missing the days where you woke up before anyone asked you to. You found your spot on the couch. You watched the picture come up slowly on a cold screen. And outside the window, without you noticing, the sun kept climbing until it was high enough that the morning was gone, the house was awake, and the world was ready for your visit outside.